In a world overwhelmed with distractions, constant noise, and the relentless chase for external validation, it's easy to get caught in the trap of seeking attention, approval, and love. We've all been there, scrolling through social media, comparing ourselves to others, wondering if we measure up. We go to great lengths to be seen, to be heard, to be valued by those around us. But what if I told you that there's a different way, a way that doesn't involve begging for attention or desperately seeking validation? A way where you don't have to compete for affection, recognition, or love. Imagine a life where you no longer have to chase after anyone's approval. Picture yourself becoming so magnetic, so centered, that others are naturally drawn to you. You no longer have to beg for a place in someone's life because your presence alone commands respect and admiration. In this world, you are the source, not the seeker. The secret isn't in chasing, it's in being. Today, we'll explore how to transform your mindset and energy, drawing on the profound wisdom of Zen and Buddhist teachings, which emphasize the power of non-attachment, mindfulness, and self-sufficiency. These ancient teachings show us that the secret to attracting the right people and living a truly fulfilling life lies in the art of letting go and focusing on our own growth and peace. By the end of this video, you'll uncover 3 powerful principles that will shift your perspective, helping you become someone people will naturally seek out. These principles don't require you to beg, compete, or plead for attention. Instead, they will show you how to cultivate your own presence in such a way that others will be drawn to you effortlessly. So, if you're tired of chasing after fleeting connections and external recognition, keep watching. Today, we'll teach you how to stop seeking and start being. And in doing so, you'll become someone others can't help but want in their lives. Part 1. The story of the silent monk and the restless merchant. Once, in a distant land, there lived a merchant named Arvid, renowned for his vast wealth and power. His name echoed through every marketplace, and his caravans, laden with exotic goods, crossed many countries. Arvid was a man of prestige. His riches were limitless, his influence immeasurable. Yet, despite his great success, he felt a growing emptiness. People treated him with a certain reverence. Yes, but it was never the kind that mattered most. Those who called themselves his friends came only when they needed something, a loan, a favor, a chance to benefit from his fortune. They were quick to praise him when he offered them gifts, yet they disappeared as quickly as the wind when a better opportunity presented itself. No matter how many lavish feasts he hosted or expensive gifts he gave, the attention he craved always slipped through his fingers. The more he gave, the more hollow he felt inside. His relationships were nothing more than transactions. He couldn't help but wonder, why is it that no matter how much I possess, I still feel invisible? One day, while preparing for yet another trade journey, Arvid overheard 2 traders talking about a monk who lived atop a faraway mountain. This monk, they said, was known not for his wealth or his grand deeds, but for something far rarer, the ability to attract people without ever uttering a word. People from all walks of life, kings, poets, warriors, even beggars, made arduous journeys just to sit in the monk's presence. It wasn't his knowledge or his riches that drew them in. No, it was simply him. The monk's aura was so magnetic, so powerful, that people would climb the steep mountain paths, endure the harsh weather, just to be in his quiet company. Intrigued by this mystery, Arvid decided that he would meet this monk. If I can understand how this man commands such devotion and respect with nothing but his presence, maybe I can learn the secret to making people truly see me. 2. And so, after weeks of traveling, Arvid arrived at the foot of the mountain. The climb was grueling, the air thin, and the winds fierce. Yet, nothing could deter him from reaching the top. Finally, he arrived at a small temple, its stones worn smooth by time. Inside, sitting beneath an ancient tree, was the monk. He was unmoving, eyes closed, completely immersed in his meditation. There was no pomp, no welcome. The monk didn't even acknowledge Arvid's arrival. Frustrated by the lack of response, Arvid, ever impatient, approached the monk and asked, "Why is it that I, a man with great wealth and power, must beg for attention, while you, who own nothing, are sought by kings and commoners alike? What is your secret?" The monk did not respond. He simply rose, walked to a nearby stream, and filled a small, simple cup with water. Without a word, he placed the cup before Arvid, then returned to his seat. Resuming his meditation, Arvid stared at the cup in confusion. What does this mean? He wondered. Was this some kind of test? Why would the monk, a man of such wisdom, give him nothing but a simple cup of water and then remain silent? He waited, but there was no answer. The merchant's frustration grew, and yet, as he looked down at the still water in the cup, something strange began to happen. The water was perfectly clear, calm, and still. It was as if time itself had paused in that small, delicate vessel. The water didn't move or ripple, yet it reflected everything around it, the bright blue sky above, the tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, and even the birds who fluttered by. The water didn't chase after the birds, nor did it try to hold on to the wind. It simply was. Arvid's mind began to quiet as he stared at the water. It became clear to him, this was no ordinary lesson. The water, in its perfect stillness, had drawn everything toward it without effort. It didn't need to shout or seek attention. It didn't compete for anyone's gaze. Birds drank from it because it was there, calm and unassuming. The breeze rippled its surface because it was in the natural flow of things. In that moment, Arvid understood something profound. The water wasn't trying to attract anything. It wasn't striving to gain anyone's attention or admiration. And yet, everything in nature was drawn to it. The monk, just like the water, did not chase after anyone's gaze or approval. People came to him, not because he demanded their attention, but because his presence was a natural force that pulled them in. Effortlessly, the first lesson hit him like a wave. True attraction does not come from what we possess or what we try to control. It comes from being still, calm, and centered in ourselves. Arvid had spent his whole life trying to be seen, heard, and valued by others. He thought that by accumulating wealth and giving lavish gifts, he could gain their admiration. But in truth, he had been chasing shadows, trying to hold on to something that could never be grasped. As he sat there, contemplating the simplicity of the lesson, something in his heart began to shift. He no longer needed to prove himself. He no longer needed to beg for attention. Instead, he needed to become like the water, still, calm, and self-sufficient. He had been looking outward for something that could only be found within himself. The monk, still sitting in silent meditation, had already given him the greatest gift of all. The lesson was clear: when you stop chasing, you will begin to attract. Arvid sat in stillness, feeling the weight of the lesson settle in his soul. The monk's silence, the stillness of the water, and the peace that radiated from the simple act of being. This was the secret he had sought all along. Part 2. 3 Key Principles for Becoming Magnetic. 1. Master the art of presence. The first lesson Arvid learned was about the art of presence. It wasn't about performing for others, nor was it about impressing them with gestures, words, or gifts. True presence, as the monk demonstrated with his silent meditation, does not demand attention, it invites it naturally. In the hustle and bustle of life, we often get caught up in trying to be everywhere at once, multitasking, and constantly worrying about how others perceive us. But true magnetism comes from being fully immersed in the present moment. Whether you're speaking to someone, working on a project, or simply sitting alone, your energy can radiate outwards. When you are genuinely there, people feel it, they sense your focus and attention, and without realizing it, they are drawn toward you. Zen teachings emphasize this idea. The restless mind of a seeker is always moving, always chasing after something, approval, validation, or a goal. This constant motion creates noise and distractions, both internally and externally. In contrast, the wise mind is still, like a calm pond reflecting the moon. There is clarity and space for others to find peace in your presence. Arvid, as he observed the monk, began to realize that his own mind was never still. His thoughts were always racing, constantly preoccupied with how he could be seen, how he could be admired. This constant anxiety, the need for approval, was what kept people at arm's length. He was never truly present with them, he was always busy trying to impress them. As a result, his interactions felt forced, shallow, and transactional. People didn't truly connect with him. Determined to change, Arvid took time to practice stillness. He began to spend entire days in silence, simply observing the monk and the quiet beauty of the world around him. He learned to let go of the incessant need for validation. As he sat in silence, his mind began to quiet as well. He no longer worried about impressing others. Slowly, he became more aware of the present moment. And to his surprise, something remarkable began to happen. People began to notice him, not as the desperate merchant trying too hard to gain attention, but as a man who was simply there. His presence, once unnoticed, now commanded a quiet kind of magnetism. He wasn't chasing after recognition. Instead, he had become so attuned to the present moment that attention came to him effortlessly. 2. Cultivate non-attachment. The second principle that Arvid discovered was non-attachment. This is a central theme in both Zen and Buddhist teachings, letting go of the need to control outcomes and learning to accept things as they are. For Arvid, much of his life had been about control. He wanted to control how people saw him, how they responded to his gestures, and how they valued his worth. Whether it was through wealth, gifts, or acts of generosity, he was always trying to make people respond to him in a way that reflected his own desires. But in doing so, he had been chasing shadows. True magnetism, however, comes when we stop trying to force things to happen and instead allow things to unfold naturally. Non-attachment doesn't mean we stop caring about the people in our lives or the things we want to achieve. It simply means we let go of the constant grasping. When we stop trying to control everything, we make space for the universe, or life itself, to bring us what is meant for us. Arvid's realization came when he observed the monk. The monk, despite his popularity, never seemed to cling to any outcome. He didn't seek attention or admiration. Instead, he simply allowed people to come to him, to sit with him, and to learn from him. The monk didn't care whether they stayed or left, whether they praised him or ignored him. He was detached from the need for approval, and this non-attachment made him even more magnetic. People were drawn to his peaceful energy, the freedom that came from not needing anything from them. Arvid began to practice non-attachment in his own life. He stopped forcing people to like him. He stopped trying to make everyone around him happy. Instead, he started to focus on being content with himself, without needing constant validation. This shift in mindset allowed him to let go of his anxiety and truly connect with others in a genuine way. 3. Develop inner self-sufficiency. The third principle Arvid learned was the power of inner self-sufficiency. It's the understanding that your happiness, your sense of worth, and your fulfillment must come from within, not from external sources or validation. For years, Arvid's life had been about accumulating wealth and possessions, hoping that they would make him happy. He believed that having more people, more money, more success, would bring him the love and admiration he craved. But he never felt truly fulfilled. There was always a gnawing emptiness inside him that no amount of external validation could fill. The monk, however, didn't seek anything outside of himself for his happiness. His joy was not tied to what he had, but to who he was. His peace and contentment came from within, and it was this inner strength that made him magnetic. People didn't come to him because he had material wealth or worldly success. They came because they felt something deeper, something profound, that resonated with him on a soul level. Arvid, after spending more time in silence, realized that his own sense of worth had always been contingent on external factors. He had tied his identity to what others thought of him and what he could offer. But true self-sufficiency meant recognizing that his worth didn't depend on anything external. His worth came from the fact that he was enough, just as he was. By developing inner self-sufficiency, Arvid stopped relying on others to fill the emptiness he had once felt. He no longer needed others to affirm his value. His sense of worth came from the fact that he had learned to be at peace with himself. This inner peace gave him a quiet confidence that drew people to him. He wasn't seeking anything from him, he was simply offering him the fullness of who he was. And that was enough. Through these 3 principles, mastering the art of presence, cultivating non-attachment, and developing inner self-sufficiency, Arvid transformed. He no longer chased after attention or approval. Instead, he became someone who people naturally gravitated toward, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied a peace and magnetism that was impossible to ignore. And in doing so, he became a source of inspiration for everyone around him, just as the silent monk had been. Part 3. The power of letting go and becoming magnetic. At the core of Zen and Buddhist teachings lies a profound truth. Attachment is the root of suffering. This simple yet powerful concept speaks to the very nature of our struggles in life. We often find ourselves craving attention, seeking approval, and desiring validation from others, believing that our happiness is dependent on how others perceive us. But in doing so, we unknowingly hand over the reins of our happiness to the very people and circumstances we seek to impress. We become slaves to external validation, and in that pursuit, we lose ourselves. The paradox of life, however, is that the more we chase, the further away the things we desire seem to run. The harder we try to grab hold of recognition, the more elusive it becomes. We push harder, scramble for attention, and force our way into conversations or situations, yet we are often left feeling unfulfilled. The truth is that the act of chasing is, in itself, what repels the very thing we seek. This endless pursuit only brings anxiety and frustration. But the moment we stop grasping, something magical begins to unfold. When we release the need to chase after attention, when we stop seeking validation and begin to simply be, life responds in ways we could never have expected. It is not that we become indifferent or emotionally closed off, but rather that we understand a deeper truth. Our value is not determined by how others see us, but by how deeply we have cultivated and nurtured our inner selves. This is where true magnetism arises, not from seeking to control the perceptions of others, but from a place of self-sufficiency and peace. When you stop forcing things to happen, the world around you begins to shift. People are naturally drawn to those who have let go of the constant need for validation. Why? Because people are intuitively attracted to peace, to stillness, to authenticity. They are drawn to those who do not need to be seen or heard in order to know their worth. The quiet confidence that comes from letting go is irresistible. Arvid's transformation came when he fully embraced this principle of non-attachment. After learning the lessons of presence and self-sufficiency, he finally understood that his worth was not tied to external approval. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. In letting go of the constant craving for recognition, he became more present with others and with himself. And as a result, people began to seek him out, not because he chased after them, but because his energy was calm, centered, and magnetic. This is the power of letting go. When we stop chasing, we stop pushing, and we stop trying to control the outcome. We open ourselves up to the flow of life. The more we release the need for others' approval, the more naturally people will gravitate toward us. We stop living in a state of hunger and want, and instead, we cultivate an aura of abundance, peace, and strength that draws others in. So, in the end, the secret to becoming magnetic is not in striving or forcing, but in the quiet power of letting go. When we stop trying to grasp at life and start simply being, we allow the beauty of life to unfold on its own terms. And that is when we truly become a force of attraction, without effort, without struggle, and without needing anyone's approval. Let's take a moment to recap the 3 powerful lessons we've explored today. Lessons that can transform the way you interact with the world and, more importantly, transform the way the world interacts with you. First, master the art of presence. When you are fully engaged in the present moment, you become a source of calm and clarity. Your energy radiates outward, not through words or efforts to impress, but through the simple act of being present. People feel your presence when you are truly there with them, when you give them your undivided attention and embrace the current moment without distractions. In this state, you naturally become magnetic, drawing others to you without saying a word. Second, embody self-sufficiency. The more whole and content you are within yourself, the less you need from others to feel validated. Neediness repels, but abundance attracts. When you stop seeking external approval and instead cultivate a sense of inner strength, you naturally become someone people want to be around. You no longer need to chase after love, validation, or attention because you've already become a complete, self-sufficient source of these things. Your energy is powerful, and people are drawn to it. Finally, become the source, not the seeker. The truth is, when you stop chasing attention and start focusing on becoming the best version of yourself, interesting, insightful, valuable, people will seek your presence without you needing to ask for it. Rather than running after recognition, you will find that it comes to you effortlessly, like a magnet attracting metal. You will no longer feel the need to force your way into conversations or situations, because your value will speak for itself. Zen teachings remind us of a profound truth: we are already enough. You do not need to beg for attention. You do not need to seek approval. When you stop seeking and start being, the world will turn its eyes towards you, not because you asked, but because you became someone who could no longer be ignored. The key to magnetic attraction is not about chasing. It's about being. It's about letting go of the need to prove yourself and simply allowing your natural essence to shine through. So, stop begging for attention. Instead, focus on becoming someone worth paying attention to. When you do, you will find that everything you've been seeking will naturally flow to you.